Hello, and welcome to this video in which I'll be talking about layering and playing with layering. So I had already gotten started on this page. We found a dead bird in our hallway, which is a beautiful gift from our cat. Very sad, beautiful little birds that live out back. And this one didn't make it. She was Mizo's prize. And I had already gotten started on this drawing with some soft pastels in the middle on the bird there, which is very close to the color of the bird. And now I'm working on the background with some acrylic marker. These are Molotow. I think they're Molotow acrylic markers, acrylic pens. And I thought I would film this because I was feeling like experimenting a bit. I don't always plan out my drawings. I didn't really plan this one out. I just got started and I wanted to show you how I usually, when I'm experimenting, how I layer my pictures and how I layer my materials. I will warn you, I never had any formal art education. I did study art history, but you usually do not really get into the way that the materials work, at least not on the level I was at, or the course I took. So for me, experimenting is also a way of learning about my materials. I often learn a lot of new things when I work like this, like here, where I find out that that marker is too green, too bright. Here I've grabbed some Tombow dual tip markers. I'm using the flexible brush pen side, and I'm adding some gray tones to the bird. Again, the bird was very much yellow, like a pale yellow, and the in gray. The yellow that I'm adding now is an Eco line marker, and it's almost too bright already. But don't worry, it's about to get brighter. I don't necessarily hold myself to sticking to colors exactly as you might have seen before. That's what pictures are for. I love to do an interpretation of the image like I want to see it in my head. What you'll also see me do, and you'll see me do it here as I'm adding the Neocolor 2 markers, is often I'll add a bright layer of color and then I'll go over it with something lighter, layering the colors, and I love the effect that that's giving. You'll see me do it over and over and over again, adding a darker, more intense layer and then pulling it back with something lighter. The Neocolors too are lovely. I didn't always like them. I thought they were too messy. I wasn't sure what to do with them. But now they're quite interesting to me because the way when you add water, they become water soluble and they dry in a very matte way. So you can really use it to layer on top of each other, which I really enjoy, as maybe you would have guessed by now. Here I'm grabbing some luminance pencils in different blues to create some layering effect. For that, I'm fixing that finger with another Molotow acrylic marker. And now I'm adding some darker blues to the background with a luminance pencil. Layering on a lighter blue. Again, I love layering materials like this, and I especially love the luminance and layering them. What happens is, because especially with colored pencil, there's always a little bit of white, like you're not fully covering the underlying layer. And then when you add a lighter color, if you look closely, you can see sort of that scratchy texture that it gives you. That's because there's still bits of paper that haven't been as saturated with the previous layer. And I love the way that it blends but not quite, and it adds some texture that I love. This is interesting. So here I am starting on the hands. My feeling was at this point that I love the graphic element of the hands and how they're almost in negative space, but they seemed a bit too, the page seemed a bit too empty. I thought it wasn't, and I think it's because the values are all kind of the same. You'll see me try to fix that in different ways. One of the ways I thought of first was to maybe add something to the hands as well. Spoiler alert, that was a mistake. Here I'm even coloring in the fingers of the hand. And at this point already, I am not loving what I'm seeing. I think it completely shifts the focus from the bird to the hands, and that's not what I want to be doing this image. So you'll see later how I try to fix this. At this point, I'm already seeing that it's a mistake. And therefore, I'm grabbing my white acrylic marker and just going over it. Just sort of not fully erasing, but like knocking back that color. And it almost gives it a different, but another interesting graphic quality to the lines. I'm actually liking it, so not bad. It's not how it ends up, but it's been interesting. It's interesting to see how I sort of think through this by doing, right? Some people I know will take a photo of their work and edit it in Photoshop and then come back and see if it's a good idea. But I like, especially with these sort of, this is just my sketchbook. This isn't a commission or anything. This isn't an important piece in that sense. So I just like trying it and seeing what it does. And at the same time, I'm learning about my materials, like how well do they layer? I'm letting that dry for a little bit. And in between, I am picking back up on the background and adding some more depth to the background. This is a soft pastel from Sennelier that I'm grabbing. I love these pastels. But as you can probably tell, at this point, the paper isn't really absorbing any of it, which makes sense because there's an acrylic layer. But most of it is actually ending up on my hands. Even this darker color that I absolutely adore, I'm just rubbing it onto my own hands. So that makes a lot of sense now that I'm thinking about it, but at the time I was just trying things and it didn't work. I tried to add some outline. I do love the way that smudges. and it's sort of hanging on to the outline. I think the layering isn't as thick, but it's not really working. And you can tell that I've also noticed that it's mostly ending up on my hands. So I am grabbing a luminance pencil in a very similar color. I think it's cobalt blue. Not exactly sure. I never know the names of any of them. But yeah, that's not smudging as much, which I was looking for that smudged look. So I'm adding some Neocolors 2 again, adding some water. Knocking it back with some white Neocolors again. Then I felt like the picture wasn't quite balanced, and I wanted to add some foliage on the bottom left, and I thought it could also be like nice and symbolic of hopefully that bird is in a better place now, dreaming of flowers and plants. I love using my fingers to blend this in. It's not just very satisfying. I think it also creates some nice smudging. Then at this point I'm adding some watercolor and gouache. I like mixing them. The watercolor in itself, it's very transparent, and I add some white gouache to make it more opaque and also to lighten the color, and that way it sits slightly better on top of other mediums, I find. Now you'll see in this case, got my hands dirty. In this case, that's not quite true. It does something interesting when I layer the gouache watercolor mix on top of the acrylic marker that I've added onto the fingers, because I did decide the hands needed something. It needed a bit more warmth. So I'm adding a little bit of pink gouache mix here, but let's wait for it. But it's drying really weird. It's drying in a weird way. And I think it's because of how it's interacting with the acrylic paint underneath, and it's sort of pulling together in certain areas. getting started on that foliage, bottom left. So you'll see already that the hands are drying really weirdly, really oddly. I had not expected this at all. You'll see me going in, trying to fix it in a little bit. And I do end up, it turns out fine. This is one of those areas where, well, I'm not sure if I'd known I would have done differently, but I'm learning now that if I use the acrylic marker and then go over with the watercolor gouache thing, it dries kind of weirdly. It's not really what I was expecting it to do. So I'm just adding some water here again, reactivating most of it and then spreading it out some more, kind of equalizing the paint there. I love how the beak looks right now, and I wish I'd kept it like this. I don't, you'll see. I'm gonna faff around with it a lot more. I think I probably overworked the bird at some point, and I like the beak where it is now, so I wish I had kept it like this because it's sort of like peaceful looking. But no, this is not where it ends up. I kind of smudge it over here. At this point too, you'll see that the watercolor is starting to kind of pool on top of all of the materials I've already added. So it's not really, I mean, I keep trying for a little bit, but you'll see like full on drops just sort of like sitting there. It's not really soaking into anything because of all the layers of materials I've already added. And I'll realize that at some point. I think I've nearly messed up the hand, so I'm trying to fix that while I'm doing that because it was still wet. But at this point I'm realizing, maybe I'm not realizing, but I should have, that it's not really doing so much, that part of the drawing is a little oversaturated and it needs something else. It needs something stronger at some point. Now I'm probably off to grab some of my acrylics at this point. I still feel like the background is not giving me what I want, and I've added so many layers of materials at this point that it needs something stronger. It's taking a while. Yep, there we are. I went to grab some golden artist colors, so it's acrylic. It's a blue and a Titan green, I think. And I use that to create a bit more depth in the background here. And cleverly, I use my watercolor brush for this. I start adding first some to the bird because it is very close to the original color. It's slightly more green, but it was this very pale color. It does not end up being very pale, which I'm not mad about. But I also find out here why using a watercolor brush with acrylic marker or with acrylic paint is not necessarily a great idea. And that's because, and I found this out, and all few people who have either been artists for a really long time or taken any kind of formal art education will probably know this. The watercolor brush holds a lot of paint. It's literally designed to pick up a lot of paint. So you can it soaks up the water, it soaks up the paint, and then you can drag it out. So it creates this interesting effect that you'll see me here. Like, it creates this interesting effect where you see every little brush stroke with a medium that's less fluid. But it also makes it really difficult to blend. And the reason I use my watercolor brush is just because I'm lazy and I didn't want to outstretch my arm. I didn't even need to get up. I just used whatever I had lying next to me. But I am finding out here, especially as I try to work back into the dark areas and sort of blend it out, and it's not blending because it's dragging that lighter color to the darker area, not really blending, even with the addition of water. I'm finding out that that's just not working. So learned a valuable lesson. Don't use your watercolor brushes on acrylic paint unless you want this effect. I don't mind that this is the sort of stuff I find out during these experiments. I think probably I must have heard it or read it somewhere, but this is much more valuable to me because now I was like, okay, so here I've grabbed a brush specifically made for acrylic paint, and you'll see how much easier and better that goes. So I can add in the dark and sort of blend it out, because it's actually a very rough brush, and I never really liked this about the brushes that are specifically for acrylic paint. They're very rough, like they're almost like you're painting with like a brush you use to clean the floor. But now I understand, because they don't pick up the material and the water as much, so they don't drag it out as much. It sort of stays in one place and you can then blend it much better. It's not like the paint is not sitting in your brush for as long, so that's very helpful. So I'm adding some depth here. You'll see me continuously going to dark and then knocking it back with light, adding some more dark and knocking it back with lighter colors, and I love that depth that creates. I've also recently, I must say, really been liking using acrylic paints in my sketchbook. And this, I think it's specifically because this sketchbook can't handle it, which is absolutely amazing to me. This is an odd orange sketchbook. It's the first time I bought one of these. They're made by an independent maker. She makes all of them herself. I would definitely check it out. And they're beautiful. But the quality of the paper is absolutely stunning. Like, how many layers am I in at this point? Like 15? No, I don't know. Too many. And many other sketchbooks would not have survived this kind of abuse. But this one's holding up really great. And it's not even like crumpling or doing any type of weird folding, or, it's not pressing through on the other page either. Now, if you ask yourself, why did I add so many layers of crayons and pencils and paint, etc. before adding over this blanket acrylic layer? I don't know, okay, I was just trying. And I think that's fine. Like, I just didn't get it to be as dark or like the texture I wanted, so I keep going until I find something I like, and this I'm really liking. Now don't worry, it won't be the last layer, okay? Grabbing that very bright blue again to add some outlines, especially to the feathers. It did this beautiful scalloping, like they had scalloping edges, and it was absolutely stunning. It was such a beautiful bird, you guys. It was absolutely stunning. I really was so sad. So I wanted to capture some of that. Adding some pink to the cheeks. The amount of faffing I do with these cheeks, you guys, it's absolutely crazy. I go back and forth on it. I keep not liking the results I get with them. Adding some lighter blue to add that texture in that I lost by adding the acrylic layer. And adding some more bright green. I'm loving this shade at the moment, especially in summer. It seems like all of the grass and the trees around here are just ablaze. It's so fresh, like the green, almost bright, like the inside of a lime. Delicious. Doing some slightly darker outlines for the details. And let the faffing with the cheeks begin. So I knock it back, make it darker. Decide I don't like it, and make it lighter again. And use some water to fix it. Use some darker watercolor to make it darker. Mess up the beak further. Decide it's too bright and make it lighter again. Mess up the beak. Mess it up further. Decide instantly that was wrong. Mess up the shape. Make the cheeks darker inside. Maybe I should just stop touching this. And there we are. That's the final page. Here's a list of all of the materials I used, roughly in order. You can pause and take notes. And then I thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing any questions, or you can just laugh at me in the comments too. Thank you so much for watching.